Your Halloween candy isn't magic. It's a business deal gone sideways. This Halloween, that bag of peanut M&Ms you're about to impulse buy at Target isn't the result of elves stirring cauldrons in a chocolate wonderland. It's the output of a global stress test disguised as a seasonal promotion. A retail miracle built on dying trees, illegal mining operations, and corporate math that would make a hedge fund manager blush. For the third year running, there aren't enough cocoa beans on Earth to feed the world's chocolate habit, and yet somehow your grocery store is still stacked with Snickers like nothing's wrong. That's not abundance, that's theater. Behind every fun-sized bar is a farmer in Ghana watching his great-grandmother's trees die from a virus with a name that sounds like a rejected metal band, Swollen Shoot, while illegal gold miners turn his land into a toxic crater. Meanwhile, cocoa prices just hit $12,000 per metric ton, shattering every historical ceiling like it was made of candy glass. And you're paying more for less chocolate this year, wrapped in the same red foil, sold with the same smile, marketed with the same nostalgia. Spoiler, you won't notice until you're 3 bags deep and wondering why your Halloween bucket feels lighter. Because big candy doesn't raise prices, they just make the bar smaller, squishier, and sneakier, then hire a chief Halloween officer to tell you it's all part of the magic. Your treat is now a negotiation. And you lost before you even opened the wrapper? Let's back up. Picture this. You're standing in the candy aisle at your local grocery store. Could be at Walmart, could be at Whole Foods, doesn't matter. And you're staring at a wall of chocolate that stretches from floor to ceiling. Snickers, Milky Way, Twix, Reese's, M&Ms in every color that doesn't actually change the flavor. It looks like abundance, it feels like choice, but what you're really looking at is the end result of a supply chain so stressed it's basically held together with duct tape and corporate PR. Mars Wrigley alone pumps out enough chocolate in 4 days to equal the weight of the Statue of Liberty, 1.5 million pounds weekly from their Topeka, Kansas factory, where peanuts roasted daily equal the weight of a fire truck, and M&M's roll-off lines at a rate that could stretch 120 miles in a single day. That's not a candy factory, that's an industrial complex. And right now that complex is running on fumes, prayers, and a very expensive bet that you won't notice the difference between a chocolate bar and a chocolate-flavored bar. Because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Chocolate is becoming a luxury good again. Not the fancy Swiss stuff in the gold box, all of it. The stuff you grab without thinking, the stuff you hand out to kids in Spider-Man costumes, the stuff that's supposed to be cheap, abundant, and guilt-free. That era, it's ending, and the candy companies know it. They're just hoping you don't figure it out until after Halloween. Swollen Shoot, the tree disease that's killing your chocolate supply and nobody's talking about it. Let's talk about Joseph Sasu. He's a cocoa farmer in central Ghana, working 17 acres of land that's been in his family for generations. Some of his trees were planted by his grandmother over a century ago, back when cocoa was still a colonial cash crop and Ghana was still called the Gold Coast. These trees have survived droughts, pests, political upheaval, and the slow grind of global capitalism, but they can't survive Swollen Shoot virus. Picture this. You're a cocoa tree in Ghana. You've been photosynthesizing peacefully for 80 years, minding your own business, producing pods that split open to reveal glistening white beans, the raw material of every chocolate bar ever made. Then along comes a tiny sap-sucking mealybug, basically the mosquito of the plant world, and injects you with Swollen Shoot virus. Within months, your stems bloat like overfilled sausages, your pods turn black and mushy, your leaves yellow, curl, and fall off. It's not just ugly, it's fatal. And there's no cure, no fungicide, no vaccine, no miracle tech solution from some Silicon Valley startup. The only move? Chop yourself down and hope your neighbors don't catch it. Joseph has already cut down 1,500 infected trees in 5 years. 1,500. Trees that took decades to mature. That represented his family's wealth, his retirement plan, his kids' college fund. Gone. And he's not alone. Nearly 1/3 of Ghana's cocoa farmland is now infected with Swollen Shoot virus, and the disease is spreading faster than farmers can contain it. Here's where it gets worse. Ghana and Ivory Coast together produce over 50% of the world's cocoa. When their trees die, the global supply shrinks, and when supply shrinks while demand stays the same or grows, because apparently the world can't stop eating chocolate, even during a pandemic, a recession, and a climate crisis, prices explode. This year's projected cocoa harvest is down over 700 metric tons compared to last season. That's not a rounding error, that's a catastrophe. And yet, farmers like Joseph still earn less than $1,800 a year. Even as global cocoa prices hit 12 grand a ton, yes, $12,000, Joseph gets paid the same fixed rate by Ghana's state-run cocoa board, Cocoa Bod. Why? Because the system was designed in 1947 to protect farmers from price swings, which really means protecting chocolate companies from having to pay more when the market gets tight. So while your Snickers costs $1.50 at the gas station, Joseph's earning less than $5 a day watching his livelihood rot in real time. This isn't farming, it's slow-mo motion asset stripping with a side of viral plague. And the chocolate industry, still acting like it's just a supply chain issue that'll sort itself out by Q3. Sure, Jan, keep telling yourself that while your single origin bar funds a funeral. But wait, there's more. Because swollen shoot isn't the only thing killing cocoa trees in Ghana. There's also black pod disease, which turns healthy pods into moldy, unusable sludge. There's drought, because climate change has made rainfall patterns about as predictable as a toddler's mood swings. And then there's the big one, illegal gold mining. But we'll get to that in a second. First, let's talk about what happens when a cocoa tree dies. You can't just replant and move on. Cocoa trees take 3 to 5 years to start producing pods, and they don't hit peak production until they're about 10 years old. So when Joseph cuts down a tree, he's not just losing this year's harvest, he's losing the next decade. And because he's already in his 50s, he's probably not going to live long enough to see those replacement trees reach maturity. That's not a business setback. That's generational wealth being erased in real time. And it's happening to thousands of farmers across West Africa. While Mars Wrigley's chief Halloween officer, yes, that's a real job title, held by a guy named Tim LaBelle, tells reporters that Halloween candy sales are up 9% this year. Cool, glad someone's winning. Gold diggers versus cocoa farmers. Guess who's winning? Hint, it's not the guy growing your chocolate. Cocoa trees need shade, rain, patience, and about 80 years to become truly productive. Gold miners need bulldozers, mercury, cyanide, and zero fucks to give. Guess who's winning in Ghana right now? All across the country, illegal mining operations, known locally as galamsey, which roughly translates to gather them and sell, have been storming cocoa farms like they're raiding a Fortnite map. They don't ask permission, they don't negotiate, they don't offer compensation, they show up with armed guards, cut down 6,000 trees in a weekend, dig massive pits, poison the groundwater with mercury and cyanide, strip the topsoil, and leave behind a moonscape that won't grow anything for decades. One farmer, Janet, watched it happen from her own porch in Ghana's Ashanti region. "My toil, my livelihood was destroyed," she said in an interview, "and it's not easy, it's hurting." That's not a metaphor, that's a woman watching her family's land that's been farmed for generations, turned into a toxic crater in less than a week. And there's nothing she can do about it because the miners have guns and connections, and often backing from foreign companies, including Chinese-backed outfits that supply the heavy machinery and buy the gold. Here's the math. Ghana's inflation hit 54% in 2022. That means the cost of food, fuel, school fees, and medicine all doubled in less than 2 years. Farmers who were already earning less than $5 a day suddenly couldn't afford to feed their families. So when a mining crew shows up and offers to buy their land for cash or just threatens to take it, a lot of farmers cave, not because they want to, because they're desperate. And once the land is mined, it's gone. Forever. The soil is poisoned, the water table is contaminated, nothing will grow there for decades, maybe longer. So yeah, your Halloween candy shortage isn't just about weather or bugs or some abstract supply chain issue. It's about land theft disguised as economic opportunity. It's about a government that's either too corrupt or too weak to stop illegal mining operations that are literally destroying the country's most valuable agricultural export. And it's about a global chocolate industry that still acts like cocoa is an infinite resource that'll just keep flowing no matter what. Spoiler, it won't. Joseph Sassou refuses to sell his land to miners. Even as his trees sicken and drought parches his fields and cocoa prices soar on the futures market while his paycheck stays flat, he won't sell. "This land is my inheritance," he says. "I won't let them destroy it." That's admirable, it's also probably futile, because the economic pressure is only going to get worse. Ghana's cocoa production has been declining for years, and the government's response has been to set higher production targets and hope for the best. Meanwhile, the miners keep digging, the trees keep dying, and the global chocolate industry keeps pretending everything's fine while quietly reformulating recipes to use less cocoa and more fillers. Which brings us to the next part of this story, the part where Ghana grows the beans, but Europe eats the profits. Ghana grows the beans, but Switzerland, the UK eat the profits. Welcome to colonialism too. Here's a fun fact that'll ruin your next chocolate bar. West Africa grows 75% of the world's cocoa, but it captures only 5% of the global chocolate industry's value. The rest flows to Switzerland, the United States, and the United Kingdom, where companies like Nestle, Mars, Hershey's, and Lindt melt, temper, conch, and rebrand Ghanaian beans as artisanal, luxury, single origin, or gilt. Inside Ghana, there are maybe a dozen factories that can actually process cocoa into finished chocolate, because the equipment costs millions of dollars and the government forces local buyers to pay the same price as Nestle. So when cocoa spiked to $12,000 per metric ton earlier this year, Ghanaian chocolate makers like Lloyd, who runs a small processing company called Niche, had to shut down production. Not because there weren't any beans, but because they couldn't afford to buy them. Meanwhile, Cargill and Barry Callebaut, the two companies that control about 60% of the global cocoa processing market, kept humming along just fine, because they hedged their bets with futures contracts and passed the costs downstream to retailers and consumers. That's you, by the way. You're the downstream. Lloyd's dream is simple. I want to make chocolate in Africa for Africa. I'm not going to pride myself in shipping chocolates to Europe. Noble, doomed. Because the economics are stacked against him in ways that would make a Victorian-era colonial administrator proud. Ghana exports over 95% of its cocoa as raw beans, the lowest value form of the product. Those beans get shipped to Europe or North America, where they're processed into cocoa butter, cocoa powder, and chocolate liquor, then turned into bars, truffles, and bonbons that sell for 10 times what the farmer got paid. The value added happens elsewhere. Always. And the system is designed to keep it that way, because if Ghana started processing all its own cocoa and selling finished chocolate on the global market, it would compete directly with Nestle, Mars, and Hershey's, companies that have spent over a century building brands, distribution networks, and political influence. So instead, Ghana stays locked in the role of raw material supplier. Just like it was when the British declared it a colony in the 1870s, the machinery of extraction hasn't changed, only the labels have. Michael, the founder of Fair for Ghana's first fully locally made chocolate brand, has managed to survive by pivoting away from bars and into chocolate drops for European ice cream makers. He's sold out for all of next year, not because Ghanaians are buying more chocolate, but because the global market still sees West Africa as a raw material colony, not a consumer market. And that's the real tragedy here. Ghana has the beans, the labor, the infrastructure, and the expertise to make world-class chocolate. But it doesn't have the capital, the market access, or the political power to break into the global luxury chocolate market. So it stays stuck in the low-imaging, high-risk business of growing beans while watching other countries get rich off its labor. And the chocolate industry, still patting itself on the back for fair trade certifications that do almost nothing to change the underlying power dynamics. Your ethically sourced label doesn't fix this. It just makes you feel better while the machine keeps grinding. Lilac Chocolates, the last honest man in a town full of con artists. While Mars Wrigley's shrinks bars and Hershey's adds caramel to distract you from the missing chocolate, there's a small chocolate shop in New York City that's still making 13.5-pound chocolate turkeys by hand. Yes, really. Lilac Chocolates, founded in 1923, hasn't changed its almond bark recipe in a century. Just chocolate and almonds, no fillers, no fluff, no natural flavors that turn out to be wood pulp or beaver glands. Lilac flavors. And these costumes, that took an almond bag for everybody. Well, no fillers, no fluff. Co-owner Anthony Cerrone just renewed his chocolate contract with Cargill, his supplier for the 10-pound blocks of couverture he melts down every day, and got hit with a 62% price jump. 62%. That's not inflation. That's a ransom note. Did he raise prices? Not on most items. Instead, he made the decision to accept lower margins through Halloween and Christmas. Some of our items haven't had a price increase in 2 years, he says, like a man who still believes in honor in a world that trades in loopholes and shrinkflation. His factory makes 175,000 pounds of chocolate a year, all piped, molded, dipped, and packaged by humans who actually care if the is centered on the truffle. That's not a business model, that's a religion. But even Anthony admits, if cocoa keeps climbing, he'll have to cave. Because you can't run on goodwill when your raw material costs more than your rent. Lilac's bestseller is almond bark. Just 2 ingredients, no tricks, no compromises. It's the kind of thing your grandma would have bought in the 1950s, back when chocolate still tasted like chocolate and not like a science experiment designed to maximize shelf life and minimize cocoa content. But that world is disappearing fast, because while Lilac is trying to hold the line on quality and price, the giants are playing a different game entirely. They're not competing on taste or integrity. They're competing on margin optimization, supply chain efficiency, and consumer psychology. And they're winning because most people don't notice when their candy bar shrinks by 10%. They don't read ingredient labels. They don't compare prices per ounce. They just grab the red wrapper and move on with their lives. And that's exactly what the industry is counting on. Lilac isn't just a chocolate shop, it's a relic of integrity in an industry that's been strip mined for profit. And relics don't last long in a market built on shrinkflation, reformulation, and the slow erosion of quality in the name of shareholder value. Anthony's holding on for now. But for how long? That depends on whether enough people care about the difference between real chocolate and chocolate-flavored candy. And based on current trends, the answer is not enough. Shrinkflation, how your candy bar got gaslit, you didn't even notice. Let's play a game. Find the chocolate bar that's the same size it was in 2019. Go ahead, I'll wait. Check the Hershey's Kisses bag. Compare the Cadbury multi-pack. Measure the Kit Kat. Look at the Galaxy bar in the UK. Yeah, didn't think so. Hershey's quietly shaved nearly 2 ounces off its Kisses bag. Mondelez cut Cadbury multi-packs. Nestle shrunk Kit Kats by 17% in Australia. Mars slimmed Galaxy bars in the UK by 10 grams. None of these companies raised prices, at least not officially. They just made the product smaller and prayed you wouldn't notice. And guess what? Most people don't. Because who measures their M&Ms? Who weighs their Snickers? Who compares the 2019 Reese's Cup to the 2024 version? Nobody. That's the genius of shrinkflation. It's invisible, it's deniable, and it works. This isn't inflation, it's psychological jujitsu. You feel like you're getting the same treat, but you're actually paying more per gram of cocoa, while the company protects its profit margin like a dragon hoarding gold. And here's the bonus move. Reformulate. Add cheap fillers. Reese's now has caramel and peanut butter cups. New Kit Kats are just dipped, not fully coated. It's like ordering a steak and getting a beef-flavored sponge. But hey, at least the wrapper's still red. And that's what really matters, right? The brand, the nostalgia, the feeling that you're getting the same thing you got as a kid, even though you're objectively not. Because the truth is, chocolate companies aren't in the chocolate business anymore. They're in the brand management business. The product is secondary. What matters is that you keep reaching for the same wrapper even as the contents shrink, the ingredients change, and the price creeps up. Mars Wrigley claims it hasn't changed US recipes, but Tim LaBelle, the actual chief Halloween officer, a title that sounds like it was invented by a marketing team on mushrooms, admits they've raised suggested pricing for retailers and cut costs elsewhere in the system. Translation, they're squeezing suppliers, shrinking portions, and reformulating where they can get away with it. The result? Your Halloween bucket may look full, but it contains less actual chocolate than ever before. And if you're buying name brand candy, you're paying more for less, while the companies protect their margins by shifting risk downstream to farmers, processors, and you. This isn't a conspiracy. It's just business. Cold, efficient, and completely legal. And it's happening across the entire industry, from luxury brands to gas station impulse buys. The only difference is how honest they are about it. Spoiler, they're not. Mars Wrigley's Halloween playbook. More candy, less chocolate, and a whole lot of gummies. At Mars Wrigley's Topeka, Kansas factory, the place that makes enough candy daily to stretch from Kansas to Chicago if you laid it end to end, they're not panicking about cocoa prices. They're pivoting. Meet Tim LaBelle, actual chief Halloween officer, a man whose LinkedIn title sounds like a joke, but whose job is deadly serious. While your local chocolatier sweats over bean costs and wonders if they'll survive the next quarter, Tim's betting the future isn't in cocoa, it's in gummies. Gummies, fruit, and sour candies are more popular among younger generations, he says. Like a man who just discovered kids will eat anything if it's neon sticky and comes in a resealable pouch. So this Halloween, Mars is pushing mixed bags, chocolate and Skittles, Snickers and Starburst, M&Ms and Lifesavers. Why? Because if cocoa becomes too expensive or scarce, they've already trained Gen Alpha to love fruit chews. Genius? Ruthless? Both? Inside the Topeka plant, the scale is staggering. They roast enough peanuts daily to equal the weight of a fire truck. They coat them in just enough chocolate to qualify as peanut M&Ms, and yes, that's a legal definition regulated by the FDA, because apparently we need the government to tell us what counts as chocolate. Then they spray on candy shells in colors that, fun fact, all taste exactly the same. The color doesn't change the flavor, admits a Mars engineer, shattering childhood illusions worldwide. Red, blue, green, yellow, it's all the same sugar coating. The only difference is the dye. But you believed it tasted different, didn't you? That's not your fault, that's marketing. And it works, because Mars has spent decades training you to associate colors with flavors, even when there's no actual difference. That's not deception, that's just really, really good branding. Meanwhile, every M&M gets inspected for correct color, size, and M placement. Any associate on the line can shut down production if they spot a defect. That sounds impressive until you realize the real quality control happens in the boardroom, where executives decide how much real cocoa your chocolate really needs. And the answer, increasingly, is less, because cocoa is expensive, volatile, and hard to source sustainably. Gummies? Cheap, stable, and infinitely scalable. So this Halloween, Mars is producing more candy than ever, but more candy doesn't mean more chocolate. It means more options to sell you something that barely counts as chocolate at all. And you'll buy it because it's Halloween, because it's tradition, because the wrapper's still red and the M is still centered and the bag still says fun size, even though there's nothing fun about paying more for less. The science of making you not notice, or how retail psychology became a blood sport. Let's talk about the science of shrinkflation, because it's not just about making bars smaller, it's about making you not care. Retail psychology is a blood sport, and the candy industry has been playing it longer than most. Step 1, keep the packaging the same size. Even if the bar shrinks, the wrapper stays big. Why? Because your brain registers size visually before it registers weight. You see the same red wrapper, the same logo, the same shelf placement, and you assume it's the same product. Step 2, change the shape. Make the bar thinner but wider, or shorter but thicker. Your brain doesn't do geometry in the checkout line, it just sees chocolate bar and moves on. Step 3, add air. Aerated chocolate, like Aero bars or Wispa, uses up to 40% less cocoa than solid bars but feels just as indulgent because of the texture. You're literally paying for bubbles. Step 4, reformulate with cheaper ingredients. Replace cocoa butter with palm oil, add more sugar, use chocolate-flavored coating instead of real chocolate. The label changes, but most people don't read it. And even if they do, they don't know what cocoa solids or milk fat actually means. This isn't new. The food industry has been doing this for decades across every category, from cereal to ice cream to potato chips. But chocolate is special because it's tied to emotion, nostalgia, and ritual. You don't just eat a Snickers. You remember eating Snickers as a kid. You remember Halloween, trick-or-treating, trading candy with your siblings. That emotional connection makes you less likely to notice when the product changes, because you're not buying chocolate, you're buying a memory. And memories don't shrink, they just get more expensive. The luxury chocolate market is playing a different game. Brands like Lindt, Godiva, and Valrhona are leaning into scarcity, positioning chocolate as a premium product for special occasions. They're not shrinking bars, they're raising prices and adding gold foil. Because if chocolate is becoming scarce, why not make it feel exclusive? Why not turn it into a status symbol? It's the same strategy the wine industry used when climate change started threatening vineyards. Make scarcity sexy. Make it aspirational. Make people feel like they're part of an elite club just for being able to afford it. And it works. Because humans are wired to want what's rare. We don't value abundance, we value scarcity. And the chocolate industry knows it. It's transportation, tech, and the supply chain that's barely holding together. Let's talk logistics, because none of this candy gets to your grocery store by magic. It gets there by truck, train, ship, and plane, moving through a global supply chain that's currently held together with duct tape, hope, and a truly staggering amount of diesel fuel. Cocoa beans grown in Ghana get shipped to processing plants in Europe or the US, where they're turned into chocolate liquor, cocoa butter, and cocoa powder. Those ingredients get shipped to candy factories like Mars Wrigley's Topeka plant, where they're mixed with sugar, milk, peanuts, and whatever else goes into your favorite bar. Then the finished candy gets shipped to distribution centers, then to regional warehouses, then to individual stores. Every step of that process costs money, and every step is getting more expensive. Transportation costs have spiked over the past few years thanks to fuel prices, labor shortages, and the general chaos of global shipping. Remember the Ever Given, the container ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal and blocked global trade for a week? That wasn't a one-time fluke. That's the new normal. Supply chains are fragile, they're complex, and they're optimized for efficiency, not resilience, which means when something goes wrong, a pandemic, a war, a climate disaster, a labor strike, the whole system seizes up. And chocolate, being a global commodity that requires multiple processing steps across multiple continents, is especially vulnerable. Tech is supposed to fix this. Blockchain for supply chain transparency, artificial intelligence for demand forecasting, drones for last mile delivery. But so far, most of that is vaporware. The real innovation happening in the candy industry isn't in transportation or logistics, it's in reformulation and marketing. How do you make a bar with less cocoa taste like it has more? How do you convince consumers that new and improved means smaller and cheaper to produce? That's where the real R&D dollars are going, not into solving the cocoa shortage, into managing your perception of it. Cars, luxury, and the weird economics of impulse buying. Here's a weird fact. The candy industry makes most of its money from impulse purchases. You're not planning to buy M&Ms. You're standing in line at Target, bored, scrolling your phone, and you see the display. You grab a bag, you don't think about it. That's the business model. And it works, because candy is cheap enough that you don't have to justify the purchase. It's not like buying a car or a luxury watch products where you research, compare, and agonize over the decision. Candy is a microtransaction, a dopamine hit, a tiny indulgence that doesn't require thought. But what happens when candy stops being cheap? What happens when that impulse buy costs $5 instead of $2? Do you still grab it without thinking? Or do you pause, reconsider, put it back? That's the question keeping candy executives up at night. Because if chocolate crosses the threshold from impulse buy to considered purchase, the entire business model collapses. Suddenly you're competing with luxury brands. Suddenly consumers are comparing your product to artisanal chocolates, craft bars, single original truffles. And guess what? Your mass-produced, shrinkflated, reformulated candy bar doesn't win that comparison. The luxury market is already seeing this shift. High-end chocolate brands are thriving because they've positioned themselves as special occasion products. You don't buy a Godiva truffle on impulse. You buy it as a gift, a treat, a reward. And you're willing to pay 10 times more per ounce because the experience feels different, the packaging is nicer, the branding is more sophisticated, the chocolate actually tastes like chocolate, but the mass market can't pivot to luxury. Mars Wrigley can't suddenly start charging $8 for a Snickers and expect people to keep buying. So instead, they're stuck in this weird middle ground trying to maintain the illusion of affordability while quietly raising prices and shrinking portions. It's a tightrope walk, and eventually they're gonna fall. Business Insider's take: why this matters beyond Halloween. If you're reading this and thinking, okay, but it's just candy, you're missing the point. This isn't just about chocolate. It's about how global supply chains work, how corporations manage scarcity, and how consumers get manipulated into accepting less for more. The candy industry is a microcosm of every broken system in modern capitalism. Exploitation of labor in the global south, consolidation of power among a handful of multinational corporations, the slow erosion of quality in the name of profit, and the use of marketing and psychology to keep consumers compliant. Business Insider has been covering this story for years, tracking cocoa prices, interviewing farmers, analyzing corporate earnings reports, and the pattern is clear: the chocolate industry is in crisis. Not because of a temporary shortage or a bad harvest, but because the entire system is unsustainable. Farmers aren't making enough money to invest in their farms, trees are dying faster than they can be replaced, illegal mining is destroying arable land, climate change is making weather patterns unpredictable, and the corporations that control the supply chain are more interested in protecting their margins than solving the underlying problems. This is what late-stage capitalism looks like: not a sudden collapse, but a slow degradation. Products get worse, prices go up, workers get squeezed, consumers get gaslit, and the people at the top keep getting richer while insisting everything is fine. Your Halloween candy is just the most visible symptom of a much larger disease. And if we don't start paying attention, if we keep accepting shrinkflation, reformulation, and corporate doublespeak as normal, we're gonna wake up one day and realize we've lost something we can't get back. Not just chocolate, but the idea that things should be good, fair, and honest. That's the real luxury. And it's disappearing faster than cocoa trees in Ghana. Final thought: what you're really buying when you buy Halloween candy. So go ahead, grab that bag of fun-sized candy, toss it in your cart, hand it out to kids who'll never know it's 10% smaller than last year, made with less cocoa, more fillers, and a supply chain held together by exploitation and environmental destruction. But don't call it a treat. Call it what it is: a compromise, a transaction, a tiny piece of a global system that's optimized for profit, not for people. Because the real luxury isn't the chocolate, it's the ignorance that lets you enjoy it without thinking about the dying trees, the poisoned land, the farmer who got paid less for your bar than you paid for parking, or the corporate executives who decided your nostalgia was worth more than their integrity. But hey, at least the M's are still centered, at least the wrapper's still red, at least you can still pretend for one more Halloween that nothing's changed, that candy is still cheap, abundant, and guilt-free, that the world is still the way it was when you were a kid, when chocolate tasted like chocolate and a fun-size bar actually felt fun. You can pretend. The candy companies are counting on it. Because the moment you stop pretending, the moment you start asking questions, reading labels, doing the math, the whole illusion collapses. And then what? Then you're standing in the candy aisle, staring at a wall of shrinking bars and rising prices, realizing you've been played, realizing that your Halloween tradition is built on a foundation of exploitation, scarcity, and corporate spin, realizing that the treat you've been buying your whole life isn't what you thought it was. So what are you gonna do about it? Buy it anyway? Put it back? Switch to gummies? Stop celebrating Halloween altogether? That's up to you, but at least now you know. At least now you can't say you weren't warned. Because this Halloween, when you reach for that bag of candy, you're not just buying chocolate, you're buying into a system. And the question is, are you okay with that? Or are you ready to ask for something better?